Welcome to the Mind on Recovery podcast, formerly known as Mental Breakdowns podcast. This is our first episode of season 2, which I am ecstatic to show you guys. Our guest right here is Dr. Natalye Pearson, a mentor of mine, and just I don't know, the little nuggets of information, little droplets of gold that are in this conversation are priceless, and I want to stop talking so you guys can hurry up and listen to it. So without further ado, our season 2 opener of Mind on Recovery podcast, featuring your host, me, Zoe, and Dr. Natalye Pearson. Enjoy. All right, welcome to the Mind on Recovery podcast. See, I switched that up.
Yes.
This is the first episode. I'm your host, Zoe, and here with me today, my guest star is one of my mentors, role model, and just all-around Black queen, Dr. Natalye Pearson.
That is awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Super nervous, so I just wanted to put that out there.
Me too. So that's okay.
Yeah. Right. I did some grounding, as I told you shortly before this. And I'm just I just chanted back to myself, this is for fun. This is to help people, and just be yourself. I'm talking to myself in this. So
well, I'm glad, because I actually needed to hear that too. But I also wanted to just thank you for providing me this opportunity, because I think this is a topic that not a lot of people really think about when we think about recovery in terms of racial oppression, racism related trauma, other reasons why, people of color can be using, so I'm really, really excited. And I'm so grateful that you invited me. So thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Okay. So just to get started off, could you please give us a short synopsis on your professional background and how you ended up in the psychology addiction medicine field, just for those who don't know?
Awesome. Yeah. Let's see here. Let's see here. I am born and raised in San Jose, California, and my sister is mentally ill, and she started having symptoms when I was in high school. And that's when I first got kind of really into psychology. I took my first psychology course class in high school. I think it was my senior year. And I was like, oh, wow, I really, really like this. Just fascinated with the mind and how it works, and how sometimes we could think things are happening to us and they're really not. Just really fascinated by all of that. And so that was my first spark. Then I got to college and I thought I was going to major in psychology, and that did not work just because my psychology tests are experiments in themselves sometimes. So my grades were not the best, but I was more interested in sociology, which is psychology of society, right? And so I majored in that, minored in ethnic studies, worked in the HIV and AIDS sector when I got out of college, and was always in some way, shape, or form working with capacity, whether or not that was my position. Somehow I was counseling people. And so, even if I was doing something admin assistant to the HIV Health Services Planning Council, I was still somehow working with people in that capacity. So I decided to go back to graduate school, and really I wanted to just but get my master's in social work. And a friend of mine said that they were applying to graduate school at the same time and that they were applying to doctoral programs. And, I just remember like, oh, I can never do that. Like that was my thought in
Right.
my mind. Like, oh wow, no. And I think maybe there's all sorts of reasons, but uh, I always just kind of doubted my intelligence. And my friend, who was convincing me to apply to doctoral programs, is Latino, and he's like, I'll apply to your first choice if you apply to mine. And I was like, okay, as a way to encourage me. And it turns out that I got accepted to the doctoral program that I applied to and waitlisted for the master's program. So I was like, oh shit, I guess I'm getting a doctorate.
Right. Yes, it's locked in.
It
You
was
won.
right. It was completely by accident, actually, that I got this doctoral degree. I just wanted to have the receipts, which is what I call my degree, to
Hmm.
work with my people around racial oppression. My focus going into graduate school was around internalized oppression. Just for me, not that the school offered a program like that. That was just my
Yeah.
personal focus. And graduated, went to school, got bit by the trauma bug, meaning like I started working people that were trauma survivors in my like all of my training settings, my pre-doc settings. And it wasn't until I graduated that and years after graduation, that I got hired at Kaiser in the addiction medicine and recovery services sector. Like um, not really thinking about it, but was like, okay, like this is an opportunity to work for Kaiser. And also I was kind of burnt out from trauma.
Yeah.
Um, I love working with trauma survivors, but sometimes, it takes a long time to see folks get better and it can be hard. So I remember I came to Kaiser San Francisco and I stepped into my first group where I um, like shadowed somebody and I was like, oh my God, I'm home. Like I get to,
This is it.
this is it. This is it. Just that I get
Um,
to work with people around reconnecting to the truth of who they are, and it was awesome. And so I've never looked back and I love working in addiction medicine. Yeah.
that's one, wow.
Mm.
Two, it's like really inspiring. Just it's really inspiring to me, trying to take from my own experience, in that like I don't know exactly what I want to do right now. I don't know where the destination is. I don't even know what it
Hmm.
looks like anymore. I thought I had such a grasp on it, and now I'm just like I don't know. And um, I'm starting to be okay with that. But
Hmm.
just hearing your story, um, it sounds like it overall is okay, and it can still end up really fine,
Oh my
just
God,
fine.
yes. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't go back to graduate school until I was 27. Um, and yeah, I didn't know a lot of, I hate to say that, that I was one of those people that just kind of fell into things, but I didn't know. What I did know is that I was constantly following my intuition and also approaching my education with like, well, let's see, like just being
Yeah.
willing to take those steps. And it was really scary, but I'm so glad I did because it just really, I was continuously like opening myself up to new things.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
You're you had some faith on you, Missy.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
but let's be real, like I also was in therapy myself. Like even before I went to graduate school, I was
Oh.
seeing a psychologist, for all of my issues.
Mm.
And I'd been seeing her for probably 3 years. And she had told me, Natalie, I think you're going to be, a healer in our community. And I was like, what is she talking about?
What? Yeah.
Bola is so crazy. But it's like, I'm so grateful because my friend's first choice was the school that she went to. So I felt like, okay, yeah, it's not like I just blindly chose like the first choice. Like I did have some association with it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so just be open and willing, see where the journey takes you.
Right. Journey this is. When
Hmm.
you're talking about like leaning more towards subjects of race and racial oppression, I want to use it as a segue into my next question. And
Hmm.
in the could you explain? Because I also didn't have any idea of this prior to maybe a year or two ago. But could you explain the importance of identity and mental health, in particular with persons of color?
Right. Ooh, ooh, yeah. Well, first, like when you say identity, do you mean racial and ethnic identity or
Yes, I was kind of meaning. I was kind of like an all-enveloping, like sexual identity. Yes, race identity, just identity in general.
Mhm.
Like knowing who one is and
Right,
how important that can be.
right. And so I'm so glad that like we're talking about like specificity and also like intersectionality, right? Because when you say
Yes.
identity, I'm like, well, which one? Because you can
Right.
have several,
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
but identity is basically like, it encompasses different roles. It's how we feel about ourselves, what we how we associate uh ourselves with various different groups, sexualities, gender.
Mhm.
Like, there's so much. I have multiple, identities that I am holding, right? So I'm an African American woman. I'm heterosexual. I'm a single mom. I'm, someone who struggles with like mental health. I'm a dark skinned African American woman. Like all of those
Mhm.
things come into play when I think about identity and more. I'm, on the larger side. So there's a way that I identify with size. Like there's just so many different ways um, that you can think of identity. But basically, quick and dirty, it's like how we move through the world and what we accept about ourselves in these various different roles.
Yes.
Mhm.
And listening to you fire off those, I don't want to place any. I don't even want to fall into that man telling woman what they are. But I think you left out statuesque. Um, yeah,
You
I
can't see
think
me do a
that's
hair toss. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's what I meant about, a larger woman. Yeah, like,
yeah.
voluptuous. Yeah, like, I'm not a small woman. I'm 5'10" pounds, but yeah, I'm not a tiny thing. And so, yeah, definitely size like has is part of my identity.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I don't think I was thinking of any of those.
Yeah.
Not like on the top level, maybe subconsciously, but I wasn't thinking of any of those identity layers, if you will, while I was in my addiction.
Mm,
I don't know what the hell I thought of myself as. That's how much the disconnect was there between me and the world at large.
right.
I knew I was in it. I knew I was doing stuff in it, but I really didn't know my place or my groups even.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I didn't grow up with my black side. I grew up with my Samoan side, so I always felt like there was something lost there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, I feel like I'm just getting that back now and starting to feel or find out what I don't know what being black is all about. I
Well,
feel like I'm going to say
yeah,
the wrong thing, but yeah, just getting more in touch with that side.
absolutely. And so, like, I could even hear in what you're talking about with your identity, it's like you're a biracial, male, right? And so it's like holding, your Samoan side, your, African American, yeah,
Yes.
African American side, and a lot of times, especially with folks that are biracial, multiracial, it's like being forced to choose, and it
Yes.
could be all that and then some, you know? And so I think you mentioned this piece about like when you were in your addiction, not really thinking about identity, and that's because I mean, there could be several different reasons, right? But
Right.
also the piece around that addiction kind of wipes out our identity. Like all of that seems to get erased, and we are just thinking about, the next high,
It,
you know,
hmm
yeah, getting that need met.
Right. And boy, did it. Yep. Did I get it met? But at the same
Right,
time, I didn't.
right,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
like that proverbial hole trying to fill. That just yeah.
right.
Uh, could you please go off, so to speak, what the kids are saying on racial oppression and how it relates to addiction?
Ooh, can I go off? Can I kick it? Yes, I can. I mean, there's so, yeah. So racial oppression, so an area of interest of mine, just professionally, what led me, you did ask me that in the beginning, like what really led me to the field. And of course, I talked about my sister, but what I think that led me to my love of psychology, but what led me to like wanting to pursue a degree was working with, I was already kind of doing these informal like sister circles with Black women around a form of internalized depression called colorism. And it was, small groups with light and dark skin, African
Hmm.
American women talking about our experiences with this thing that we have internalized as if it is our own, that has impacted us for centuries and really, um, gotten in the way of us connecting with one another, with, it's allotted privilege. It's like, it's done this, all sorts of ways that it's caused division amongst us as a people. And so that kind of was, and always having the experience also growing up of being acutely aware of race. Like I've always been aware of the fact that I am a Black, woman. And not only am I a
Yeah.
Black woman, but I'm a dark skinned Black woman. And not only that, I, grew up in, a predominantly white, neighborhood, and was always usually one, maybe two, um, Black students in the classroom. So racial oppression has always kind of been at the forefront of my mind and my experiences. And so racial oppression, of course, right, is when, someone is feeling, inferior based on being made to feel inferior based on, their ethnicity, this fucked up idea of race,
Right.
which, as you know, is a construct, but so much is built on that construct. And within that is that one race is superior and that, one is inferior. Um, but of course, it's stratified, right? Anyways, so that's like racial oppression, and it comes out in all sorts of different ways. It comes out in institutionalized racial oppression, like where we buy our homes and like what we learn in school and yada yada yada, right? We all know this. We all know this.
Right.
But then how does that like connect with like addiction? And a lot of times when I'm working with Black and brown folks, and other folks of color, a lot of times there's this element that sometimes is not. There's no space to really talk about it in the rooms of mixed company, but there's an element of like using to tap out of the pain and the stress of daily, like in so many different ways, racial oppression.
Those microaggressions.
Microaggressions, macroaggressions,
Yeah.
aggressions, gaslighting, just there's so much, right? And I know I'm speaking in very, very general terms, right? Because
Yes.
if I were to go into more detail, then we'd be here talking just about those experiences. But I have realized in my work that a lot of times, folks of color are using for multiple different reasons, but that's part of it. And it could be racial oppression through economic status or, so many different ways. I was just thinking about, folks that are like, usually the only ones in certain like corporations and so forth, the work related
Yes.
stress around being, the only black person, having to hold your face a certain way, like make your voice an octave higher so you're not too
Uh-huh.
aggressive. Like that is emotionally taxing. And so
Smiling. Yeah.
smiling, watching everything that you say, being aware that you are being watched and you are a representative for the entire race.
Heat.
Um, so that is like just one example of how someone could get mentally worn down, and look for escapism. And then there's so many other ways too, right?
Yes. A lot of other ways. I know I asked about racial oppression in regards to addiction, but
Mm-hmm.
I also want people to know it's not just drugs and alcohol we're talking about as like the primary escape route. There's also food,
Absolutely.
sex, TV,
Mm-hmm.
um, just any
Games,
other
yeah, being a
right
gamer.
binging.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Just forms of numbing out.
absolutely. And mine was food, right? So even before I became, a psychologist that worked in addiction medicine, like I had actually been in the rooms, but I had been in the rooms for Food Addicts Anonymous and Overeaters Anonymous. And I had gained and lost 100 pounds a couple of times, right? Like when I look at all the times that I have like lost like 30 pounds here, 50 pounds here, like that easily was way over 100 pounds. And then I had, weight loss surgery and then lost 100 pounds again. But it
Right.
was all around eating and emotional eating and taking in the sweetness because I have a huge sweet tooth, right? Taking in the sweetness, the comfort um, that I wasn't getting outside, I was ingesting it.
Right.
And I think a lot of folks do that and don't even realize that that is because trying to numb out.
I'm just staring at the half Oreo milkshake on my desk right now. Just like, damn.
Well, you are all you and your
What,
sweets.
what does it all
What
mean?
does it all mean? Yeah, but it's like we know when we're using something addictively, when we're using it to like, replace like actually feeling the emotion or like, because I don't want to feel this or I want to, I need liquid courage or whatever. That's
Right.
always a good sign, as opposed to like treating yourself to an Oreo milkshake.
I'll leave that where it's at.
Okay.
Really interested in how this hell of a pandemic has affected your work and the patients that you treat. Like, are you seeing a rise with anxiety,
Oh my God,
depression,
yes. Hmm.
trying new approaches, cutting slack for people, or no?
Yeah. Um, the pandemic has been really hard for us therapists. It's because so many people are in need, right? It started off
Yes.
with, are we gonna be in this for like 2 weeks? Here we are. Are we coming up on I think like the anniversary is like now, right?
Yeah, it is now. Yep.
So here we are a year later, and um, it's really like people have just folks that haven't normally engaged in, like drinking, addictively or, th- have come into the fold, right? They've noticed some unhealthy
Uh,
patterns. And then folks that have issues with substances, but like, aren't working a program or whatever, like, you know, their symptoms have definitely, shot up. So we have like a lot of folks like that are like acute, right? Meaning like they're having issues like right now. And this has been a pervasive thing. It's not like the stress of the pandemic has like, it's here and it's gone. Like it's been pervasive over the past year. People have lost jobs, homes, you know, um,
Like,
lives. Shit. Excuse me. People have lost lives, loved ones. And there's the grief and the loss and the stress of that. Constantly, people have to adjust to having like everybody up in their face all the time. Nobody's leaving, or people are like isolated. And so, and it's
yeah,
scary. It's scary out there. So it has meant that we've had a lot of people, struggling. And uh, I placed people in residential care, and at one point, one day, I remember I placed like 7 people. Me and my coworker placed 7 people alone on one day to put them in residential rehab, because then it's like we're asking you to get sober, but the things that folks used to do like pre-COVID that
yeah.
would help them, like going out to meetings, like being with company, they're doing that all online. So it's like everything has shifted, and still continuously in the backdrop is this thing called COVID. That you got to watch, how what you touch, or of course we know that the wash your hands and hand sanitizer, but it's distressing sometimes when I leave and I just see everybody wearing a mask. um so it's definitely been that folks are really, really struggling with the weight of it all, and also the fact, like the loss, the grief, the isolation. It's a lot.
It's like a it's like a silent type of scary.
Mhm, mhm,
There's nothing, like nothing's exactly on fire anymore with
mhm.
California, but
Right, literally
there's
on
just like,
fire.
right, but there's just like this underlying, like, man, shit is really serious. I feel like we're in a real, like, fragile point just everywhere, the economy, government, how we're so polarized, and it's just this underlying tension. Like, I really hope this does not break or snap or anything like that. And I don't know, thus far I've just been trying to, I don't know. I got to compartmentalize it. I got to compartmentalize it to just keep on doing my day job
Mhm.
and moving on as if nothing's really changed, even though the entire opposite is more true.
Yes. And then even more so, right, is like then you add into the mix dynamics around racial oppression, right? Like access to vaccines, and like,
Hello.
and beliefs about that for us as people of color. We have a history of, you know, not being able to trust the medical field. And why is
Mhm.
that? Because a lot of times they haven't had our best interest in the past. And so, but, also realizing like the whole world, child, has stopped. So, these vaccines, not to get into like my soapbox about it, because I know I did it for myself, but for others,
Yes.
I don't know. But like it's a lot. You see who, even in the beginning, who had access to like knowing that they were COVID positive, right? It started with the celebrities, and it's like, well, how come they got tested?
Yeah.
And we don't have tests in our neighborhood. All of that comes down to some way, shape, or form racial oppression. So it's like the acuity is there, and then there's also like the ways in which things get played out. Not to mention, like, we've just had a lot in this country within the past. I mean, it's always there, but it has been upfront in our face, with um, police brutality, the killings of, Black and Brown men and women, and lack of accountability around it. Just a lack of accountability around racist shit happening, like what happened on January 6th, that
Mhm.
totally, some folks are like, wow, no, that's really sad. But I don't think people realize that when I've spoken to like my patients, right? When when
Yes.
a lot of us have saw that happening, it was like very scary. It was like, well, fuck, what's going to happen to us, because we would never be able to get away with that. And it looks like, nobody cares. There's no accountability. And so that also adds to people feeling like, what's the point?
Right. I'm glad you mentioned that too, with it being scary, because I remember peeping it at work. They some participants had the news on in the rec room, and I just just like was walking by, and I was like, what's going on here?
Hmm.
And just looking around, and everybody was still uh just like kind of docile, like in their normal. And I was just like kind of shitting bricks in my head. I know I had to keep it together, being staff and whatnot, but I was like, is anybody else seeing this right now?
Right.
Um,
I think that was the sentiment for so many people. Is anybody else seeing this?
hello. Yeah. Um, God. Okay. So I know I've seen some pieces throughout the year that this pandemic's been going on around like the rates of drinking and drugging going up, and the number of
Mhm.
over deaths going up, and just mental health in general going down. Have you noticed the shift overall, not just during the pandemic? Have you noticed the shift with mental health going more quote unquote mainstream? And do you
Mhm.
think there's more to be done in getting the word out?
Yeah, I've been noticing that. It's been really, really interesting to see such an acceptance around mental health, especially for, like I said, people of color in our communities, because there's such a stigma, right? In a lot of communities of color around, seeking, therapy and so forth. But I think
Yeah.
like, so yes, there's been a lot of like hard things, excuse me, coming out of, it's been really hard in the pandemic, but then the silver lining is that for some folks, it's like, yo, I have to get help because I can't keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, right? The definition of insanity. But also, like, there's only so much smoking you can do. There's only so much drinking you can do. There's only so much
Right.
drugging you can do. There's only so much fucking you can do. There's only so much eating you can do. If you have learned nothing during the pandemic, it's like, then pretty soon that gets, old. And then it's like, I need help, and so, yeah, I definitely feel like there's been such like really positive messages around therapy. That's something that I like about this generation. It's like, yeah, go to therapy, get a therapist. And I'm like, all day. 'Cause
Yeah.
I say it all the time. I'm a therapy junkie. I like doing it. I like being in it. I like individual. I like group. Like, how can I go deeper about myself?
Mhm.
Um, so I'm glad that is starting to happen, and that there's such like normalizing of it. And why not?
Yeah.
Because we deserve a space for healing. That's really what therapy is. It's a space for you to kind of look at yourself and work on, like, how can I move past these painful points in my life? How can I change the narrative about, what I was told about myself, and how can I really
Hmm.
see the truth of who I am? Learn how to tolerate difficult emotions, set healthy boundaries with people in my life, break out of relationships that no longer serve me, all of that. And all of these things that I'm mentioning is stuff that people use behind. So come on to
Right.
therapy and get you some free. That's what I call it. Get you some
Oh,
free, you know.
set yourself free. Um, the yes, because I'm seeing a lot of celebrities talk about it. Like I said, seeing it a lot on a lot more news pieces, and then I've also heard in a numerous interviews like, "Oh, we used to not talk about this back in my day and stuff like that, like back in the
Hmm.
'60s, '70s." And of course, I wasn't around then, but God, I can only imagine what it was like back then when I don't know if there a word for depression back in the 50s, and anxiety and bipolar and schizophrenia, and stuff like that.
Most
I'm just
definitely, that was there. It's just
oh,
people were so
okay.
shameful about it, right? And it was like more so called, instead of bipolar, it was called a nervous breakdown.
Oh, okay.
And for housewives, like, their anxiety and all of that, they just said, here's a nice little pill for that. And it was like,
Perpetuates.
right, or you're feeling depressed and you have low energy. Well, here's like, some legal meth. I don't know. But that's the stuff that was going. It was more so that people just didn't talk about it, or when they did talk about it, it was like, oh, it was just that one incident, or like, oh, and
Right.
damn sure that's when I'm talking about that, I'm talking about like that's how it was talked about in white communities and black and brown communities in the 50s and things like that. It was just like, I mean, sure, people got, maybe the person like was dealing with depression, but there really wasn't space for us to go to see a therapist. Like that's a luxury, yo. Like it's still a luxury
Really
now.
though. Yes, I used to think that yeah, years ago. I always loved the idea of going to a therapist or seeing someone of that field, but I just always had these preconceived notions that it was mad expensive, so I just never looked into it. And then come to find out, like, oh, my insurance pays for this shit.
You mean
Like,
I can actually, yeah, like,
yeah.
yes. And so then you get to, it's funny how people kind of stumble into it, but it's so worth it, just to have time devoted to you, and to have somebody who's non-judgmental, and just holding the truth of who you are. And also, like, especially what I love about addiction medicine is that it's a little bit more direct, like it's a lot
Yeah.
more of calling, there's lots of things that go into it, but like I'm going to hold a mirror to your behavior, and I'm going to ask that hold yourself accountable. And so there's a lot of, it's more direct, in addiction medicine, because there ain't no time. If you don't get it, then like sometimes, this is the sad thing, like this is life or death, you know?
Yeah, oh, that's a good point. It is. I never thought of it like that. I guess it could be or is direct in a lot more ways than someone maybe not dealing with addiction. Because I don't know. I feel like once you're in recovery for a bit of time, you get with the status quo. The status quo being looking at your behaviors and patterns and stuff that other people may see as like getting called out on, but it's something that we need to get called out on so we can at least start addressing it and changing our behavior and
Mhm.
attitudes towards it.
Mhm,
Uh,
mhm. Yeah, looking at our behavior, there's and I talk about this, there's the abstinence piece and so forth, which is incredibly important. And then once, folks, have some abstinence, it's like being able to do some deeper work around, and why the hell was I using? What was I
right.
trying to cover up all these years? Because when you get sober, that shit is still there and it requires your attention.
Hello. Yeah.
So being able to
Yeah.
find a safe space to like really like uh explore, and how do I deal with this? How do I clean up the chaos of like, you know, addiction? And how do I deal with these underlying emotional issues? How do I relearn how to be in the world?
Right, and that shit takes time. I just had a
Yes.
cousin asking me yesterday that I haven't seen in a while, like, oh, okay, so yeah, you're still sober. Like, how does it feel? You feel free, like clear-headed. And in my mind, it was really hard to answer that because it's like, yes, I am clear-headed and I'm on my shit, so to speak. But at the same time, like you were saying, like all that shit that I was trying to press down. the majority is still there.
Yeah.
Like I'm still working on it. I'm still chipping at it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I still feel uncomfortable in my own skin.
Mm.
It's not just a wave. A wand wasn't waved and it all disappeared. Like there's still so much work to do. And of course, I couldn't say that like a little answer. They'll look at me crazy.
Like I'm
Um,
sober, but I still got issues. Yeah. I mean,
right.
yeah. And so here's like the beautiful thing is like, and then in therapy, I hope like, you get to learn that like, guess what? Everybody has those issues, right? And everybody's struggling to like, accept themselves or feel like they're worthy, of the life that they want. Everybody is struggling with in some way, shape, or form because that is part of life. Like it's not part of life for us to just feel like we got to be happy and like high all the time. Like that is some
Yeah.
unnatural shit. It's called balance,
Hmm.
and so, like, if that means that that's going by that theory, right, that there is like what goes up must come down and vice versa, then I want to learn how to like ride through these difficult times and get the message that I need so that I can apply that to my life, you know?
Absolutely. Um,
Mhm.
while we are going away from the mainstream question,
Oops,
what?
sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. This is gold. What do you think would help turn around? I said media flamed. I've never heard that phrase in my life, but I just made it up.
I
All
like
right.
it.
What do you think? Right. What do you think would turn around media flamed stereotypes of a quote unquote addict or quote unquote drug abuser or quote unquote junkie?
Ooh, child.
Like,
That's a big
you know,
one. Um, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, right? Like folks just being judged by their behavior, right? But not like getting like a good understanding of like what the fuck is really going on, right?
right.
And like you're right, like in media and movies and things like that, it's
Yes,
just
yes.
a constant demonstration, especially for Black and brown, people of color, addicts. Like
Hmm.
it's always like, this like, crackhead or dope fiend or, but I think like what could change that around is like more stories being told about the different dynamics going into like addiction for us and people being shown like um about shown like what is really going on underneath these behaviors and that addiction is way more than just the behaviors that people are judged by, right? Like understanding a little bit more that it's not just about like lying and stealing and this and that, you know
Right.
um but that's what happens when things have gone way far, right? That's what happens when in your brain that the substance has taken over and like hijacked your brain, your critical thinking. And so I think if people understood a little bit more about what the physiological pieces of it, but then
Yes.
the social aspects, the societal aspects of it, I think that could help. But like I'm talking out the side of my neck, right? I'm like, it would be great if they showed and great if they did that. But there needs to be, you know, who's gonna like green light, right? Green light those projects.
Yeah.
I used a term that I didn't know, but I feel like that was the right one.
It was the correct one.
Okay. You know, and that has a lot to do with like, just Hollywood, the entertainments, like, and social media, all of that, like what they are putting out there. And it's like there's stories to be told that show the addict in a more comprehensive view.
God, you're so right. You're so right. You knew that. I knew that, but I had to just say it. You're right.
I
Um,
know it, and I
I
know of somebody who would be like great to do that work. I don't know,
oh
somebody who I'm talking to right now.
yeah, I was thinking it right now, but then I was like, stay present, so stay present. Remember your training. Um, So I had an aunt who, to my knowledge, was just alcoholic, but I ended up living with her. Now, before I lived with her, I use the term crackhead and junkie and whatnot, but we're just gonna focus on crackhead for right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, see people that I don't even know if they were on crack, calling them crackheads, or
Mm-hmm.
even just in my mind internalizing, oh, that's a crackhead. Until I lived with her and found out she herself was smoking crack and very much addicted to it. And it threw me for one, because it's just like, here is this lady that I love with all my heart, and we crack up. She can sing. Vocal cords kind of damaged, but she can sing. She's funny, outgoing, all these things going for her. But she's also addicted to crack cocaine,
Mm-hmm.
and I just like I couldn't. I was thinking I couldn't bring myself to call her a crackhead. Like
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't fair,
Right.
knowing what I knew about her. Like you were saying, like I had a more comprehensive understanding of this human being
A
and who she really
humanizing
was.
perspective, right?
Right.
Because isn't that the other piece about it? That and it's not, like for the addict, like there's this piece that like that and this is true, like we say like, oh, that's not who they are, that's the substance, right? But also, and
Yeah.
that is true, but then there's also this way that idea can, you know be some way of like separating like the human that is suffering. Like
Right.
folks
Right.
don't
Oh
see
God.
that
Yes.
piece. They don't see the suffering, you know, and like knowing the totality of like your auntie and who she is, and how much, she loved you or loves you, and the experiences you've had with her, and that there's this thing that she's grappling with. I mean, cravings and all of that is so like that takes up so much space in your brain. Like it's
Yeah.
hard to let others in because you're suffering. You're suffering.
Right, and usually others probably just think we're having a ball,
Right.
and maybe some days we are, but
Right.
yeah,
I mean, I
I
think
mean,
initially that's how it starts, right? First, and it's
oh yeah,
so like, uh, Kaiser adolescent program, right? And this is where I got this from. Like, first it's fun, then it's fun and
say it.
trouble, and then it's just trouble.
Okay, hello.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I love that one. I love that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna pull us out of this. Uh, what are you doing to keep a level head and press on through these trying times without getting too detailed? I want to respect your privacy.
My privacy. I don't have a lot of privacy either. I'm just a big like mouthpiece. No. I I really, like I said, I really, really do enjoy my work. I do have a tendency to be a bit of a workaholic. Like I was gonna meet up with a friend today by the lake, and I was like, well, I can do it after 2:30 because I've got a patient. She's like, on a Sunday? I was like, yeah, girl. You
Right.
know? So I am learning. Um, One of the things that's come out of the pandemic is like I really have enjoyed like when I do meet up with people, like it's intentional. And so like I do something like hiking, walks. I love to walk. Even if it's just like, walking my dog for like up the block, or it's a little bit of like a break in my day because it can be really intense. But when I'm walking, I'm also like really trying to take in everything that I'm seeing and practicing a little bit of some grounding techniques, like really
Yes.
focusing on what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing, what I'm physically feeling in my body, all of that. But then like baths, I do a lot of spiritual baths. And that's like
Okay.
baths with like Epsom salt, a little bit of like pink Himalayan salt. But then I put, I actually order like spiritual baths from a friend of mine who creates them. And it's special herbs that are for like, spiritual cleansing. And like removing
What?
negativity or opening the pathways for me, opening the pathways, like, to remove blockages. And so that's
Yes.
been good. Chopping it up with friends, doing like, some Zoom meetings, with my girlfriend so we can see everyone. Yeah, and then spending time with my son. We've been doing lots of really nice things like at the marinas. There's so many here in the Bay Area. Like that's been one of our things. Like, let's go to this marina, let's go to that marina, and walking by the water. Just I really try to like be in nature in some way, shape, or form with somebody because that way I'm like connecting with spirit and I'm connecting with spirit through relationship.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah, so that helps because, we're dealing with so much. January 6th, I'll tell you, there's been 2 days during the pandemic that have been really, really hard for me. The Orange Day, remember the Orange Day?
Orange. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was nuts. There was the day the sun didn't
Right,
rise.
right. And who knows, like, who listens to your podcast? Like, maybe they're way, like, way out there in the ether. But there was a day, was it September?
Right. Oh God, I
I
don't
don't
know.
know. Sometime in the
Yeah,
fall. Let's
it was
do
last
that.
year.
Sometime in the
Right.
fall. It was during California's like lovely fire season that we have now.
Hmm.
We're getting ready to head into like our fourth year of this craziness. Thanks global warming. And so like the day, like there was so much ash that the day was like orange and like it was dark and it was like apocalyptic. So that day stands out in my mind. And then the other day was January 6th, right? When um,
That's right.
white supremacy showed their narrow behind, uh, and those days were like really hard. And I think what I did to kind of keep myself grounded was like, I mean, I know the Orange Day. I just like really talked to my friends and hugged my son and like, read books and just really tried to stay grounded, with just being with my loved ones in any way I can. And then with January 6th, yeah, it was a lot of like, look at this shit and like talking it out with my community because I had to find my sources of support around that. And that's definitely like, I have some really good girlfriends that do similar work to me and like really just processing that, like, and knowing that I wasn't crazy by what I was seeing and what I was feeling. Um, Fear
Right.
is
You have to
real
validate.
around that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That. Okay. Yeah. I'm gonna. I still want to take. I want to try to steal your walking in the woods one. Like nature, yeah, getting I just want to amend it to just myself. I don't know. Is that isolation-y?
No, I mean, I don't
Open
always
haters.
walk with a friend. Like sometimes I do,
Yeah.
but I mean, a lot of times I do, but sometimes I do it by myself. Yeah, here's the thing, like you get to follow your intuition and know what feels right for you. Um,
Okay.
of course, I'm always gonna, if you have a tendency to isolate, like maybe every other time, you do it with somebody.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
like there's so many parks around here. Yo, like so many trails and parks in the East Bay. It's amazing.
Yeah, I didn't know that a few years ago. I had a pretty narrow, stereotypical view of the East Bay.
What?
I just hung out in the peninsula. Yeah, I was like,
Shame
I don't
on
want to get
you.
shot over there. I don't. There are a lot of gangs or
You know
something.
what?
And then like a few years ago, I came and I seen like nice neighborhoods. We were over there by Lake Merritt, and I was like, oh, they got some pretty neighborhoods around here. It's not East Bay's not so bad. And then yeah, the trails and the mountains.
It's
I'll have to check it out.
gorgeous. Oakland is gorgeous. Let's just be specific. I mean, there's
Yeah.
lots of other places in the East Bay, but Oakland is gorgeous. We have our hot spots, no doubt, but we also have quite a bit of like amazing like nature, like Redwood Regional Park, and And then I always say, like, to those folks that still want to think a certain way about Oakland, cool, stay the bleep out of Oakland because I'm trying to buy a house.
Right. There you go. There you go.
And I need the prices to like not go up anymore, but I don't know if that's wishful thinking.
Oh, I wanna go down the road with that
Mm,
one, with that. But I want to be also be respectful of your time, and so if I could just ask one last question of you before I call it a
of
wrap,
course.
what would you recommend for anyone else listening, anyone else interested in keeping a level head and pressing on through these trying times?
Mm, like some good coping skills.
Um, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think like always. So the thing is like I think sometimes folks feel stress and we like to talk ourselves out of it, like, oh, it's not that bad, or oh, I shouldn't feel that way because like in comparison to other people it's
Right.
not that bad. And what I say is like, it's all relative, and like, you are having your experience, and so like one, like not to deny what's true for you, and try to explain it away or like make it seem like you're not deserving of taking up space in that way. And then like there's so many ways right now that people are accessing help, right? There's so many ways that you
Yeah.
can do therapy. You don't have to do like, ain't nobody going into nobody's office, so just know that. So there's plenty of ways to do telehealth. Um, of course, like you can contact Kaiser in the Department of Psych, but you don't have to. You could like, find someone. There's several different like app.
Psychology
Thank you. I was
Today.
going to say app, Psychology Today. There's Therapist of Color .com. That's actually like real. You can look for folks that way. Go to a freaking meeting, There's an AA 12-step, not AA, but 12-step program for everything, including
Yes.
like, there's Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Marijuana Anonymous, Debtors Anonymous, Under Earners Anonymous, Food Addicts Anonymous, like, Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous. Like, there's so much, and ways that you can start to create community, find your people. So I'm always talking
Yes.
about going to meetings, and if meetings aren't your thing, start within your own, but this is an old school word, your own Rolodex, start within your own, like, contacts, scroll through and
There you
find
go.
your sources of support and contact them and say like, I just need to like talk to you or talk to someone. Um, yeah, don't be afraid to ask for help, because it is a trying time and you're not alone. You're not alone in how you feel about this pandemic, COVID, like, racism, people getting killed. Like, yes. And so, how do we make it through? We make it through with one another and getting connected to, our people.
Oh, you're
Ah,
amazing.
stop it.
Oh God, I want to thank you one more time for joining us. That's a wrap for our episode. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks. I'm your host Zoe, and this is the lovely Dr. Natalye
Oh,
Pearson.
thanks for having
Thank
me.
you.
Thank you so much.
Ooh, oh, oh. I bet you thought I forgot. No, I couldn't forget the bell. The bell is back, and so is the podcast. Mind on Recovery. That was our season 2 opener with guest Dr. Natalye Pearson. Um, I hope you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. We are officially moving to bi-weekly drops instead of an episode every week. It's going to be an episode every 2 weeks, so I don't run myself into the ground. And in 2 weeks, let me check on my handy dandy calendar. In 2 weeks, on March 28th, we will drop our next episode, number 2, with none other than Mr. Fred DeBose on the topic of meditation. So hang tight. Continue to send me any questions or topics that you might think are interesting to record or discuss on. And I will see everyone in 2 weeks. Namaste. Peace.